and thank you for joining us today in our study of the book of Psalms. Today we are in Psalm 25, and in this Psalm of David, things are going to be laid out a little bit differently because more than just a song or a song as we would commonly think of it, this psalm is actually more of a poem, and it has a very different layout than any of the other psalms that we've looked at to this point. And the difference is this psalm is an acrostic poem. And so there are 22 verses in this particular psalm, and each of those verses starts with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So the first verse begins with the first letter, the second verse with the second letter, the third verse with the third letter, and so on. And so, because of that, you may find that the psalm in its declarations seems a little bit disjointed, and that's because of the style that it is. Yet there are still some very interesting themes that work their way through the message of David's psalm. So let's examine Psalm 25. Beginning in verse 1, we read, "To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. O my God, I trust in you. Let me not be ashamed. Let not my enemies triumph over me. Indeed, let no one who waits on you be ashamed. Let those be ashamed who deal treacherously without cause. Show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. On you I wait all the day. Remember, O Lord, your tender mercies and your loving kindnesses, for they are from of old. Do not remember the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. According to your mercy remember me, for your goodness' sake, O Lord. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore he teaches sinners in the way. The humble he guides in justice, and the humble he teaches his way. All the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth, to such as keep his covenant and his testimonies. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my iniquity, for it is great. Who is the man that fears the Lord? Him shall he teach in the way he chooses. He himself shall dwell in prosperity, and his descendants shall inherit the earth. The secret of the Lord is with those who fear him, and he will show them his covenant. My eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he shall pluck my feet out of the net. Turn yourself to me, and have mercy on me, for I am desolate and afflicted. The troubles of my heart have enlarged. Bring me out of my distresses. Look on my affliction and my pain, and forgive all my sins. Consider my enemies, for they are many, and they hate me with cruel hatred. Keep my soul, and deliver me. Let me not be ashamed, for I put my trust in you. Let integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you. Redeem Israel, O God, out of all their troubles." While certainly in the translation into English it does not keep its form as far as each verse beginning with a different letter, you certainly feel the progression through the thoughts of David as in the writing of this psalm. And so let's look at a few things, even though there's not this completely laid out thought process in every respect. Let's look at a few things from Psalm 25. First of all, at the beginning of the psalm, you have the claim that I put my trust in God without being ashamed. And so David talks about the fact that God is the one in whom he has his trust, and he refuses to be ashamed. He's going to mention this again at the very end of the psalm. He refuses to be ashamed of putting his trust in God. You know, for many people, putting their trust in someone other than themselves is a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you are incapable of handling things yourself. And so, for pride's sake, somebody is going to make sure that they keep their trust in number one, because they want people to know that they are strong and that they can take care of themselves. They don't need any help. Yet David here says, "O my God, I trust in you. Let me not be ashamed. Let not my enemies triumph over me." It's not a shameful thing for an individual to put their trust in God. As a matter of fact, it is a sign of strength of faith to recognize that God can and will help, and that we cannot handle everything ourselves. It is the fool who is one who believes himself to be strong when he is weak, and refuses to acknowledge the need for help when he cannot handle everything himself. So there is a sense in the first few verses of the psalm of the need to put your trust in God, but not out of an attitude of shame, but instead out of an attitude of wisdom and recognition. He says in verse 3, "Indeed, let no one who waits on you be ashamed. Instead, let those be ashamed who deal treacherously without cause." The second thing that you see as you go through the psalm is David's focus on the goodness of God. Beginning in verse 6, he talks about the fact, he says, "Remember, O Lord, your tender mercies and your loving kindnesses, for they are from of old. Do not remember the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. According to your mercy, remember me, for your goodness' sake, O Lord." And he's going to go on in this way, proclaiming and remembering the goodness of God, and not just the goodness toward him. Notice he says that these things are from of old. And as you look back, you can see the goodness of God. You can see the way that God takes care of those who are his servants, the way that he remembers them, and yes, the way that he forgives them. And so you have this focus in the midst of this, of the goodness of God. He talks about in verse 9 that he guides the humble in justice and he teaches the humble his way. God wants people to know what the right choices are. God wants people to do the right thing. But it takes a humility of heart to be willing to listen to God. And it goes back to that fact of not being ashamed of putting your trust in someone other than yourself. And so you have the proclamation throughout this psalm of the goodness of God. But in the third place, I want us to point out from Psalm 25 the statement of verse 15. Because there David makes this statement. He says, "My eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he shall pluck my feet out of the net." When our eyes are focused on God, it can get us out of a lot of trouble. It's when our eyes become focused on ourselves or on everything that is going on around us, when we become so focused on the world of today that we forget what it is we're striving for and what it is we're working toward, that's when we get tangled in the nets of this world. But when we keep our eyes focused on God, when we keep our eyes focused on us doing what is right, having the right relationship with God, and living according to those standards, we won't get tripped up in the net, because God will take care of us. And when we start to get tripped in that net, our eyes will be focused in the right place, and we will be able to get out of that problem. Our focus has a great deal to do with how we view life, how we walk through life, and also how we handle the troubles of life. So let's make sure our eyes are in the right place. These are some of the things that I've seen in Psalm 25. There's many other things that we could talk about from this psalm, but I hope that these have been beneficial to you. Next time, we will come back and we will begin looking at Psalm 26. I hope you'll join us then. But until then, have a great day.